This is Friday Focus on NPR News 91. I'm Sadie Babitz. 5 years ago, Boise filmmaker Seth Randal set out on a journey to tell a sordid tale that unfolded some 50 years ago.
A probation officer announced there was a sex ring involving teenagers and grown men. In the emotional reaction that followed, 16 men were prosecuted, and nearly half of them were involved with consenting adults.
That tale plays out in Randal's new film called The Fall of 55, which makes its debut at a New York Film Festival in June. The film explores issues raised by the book The Boys of Boise, which came out in the mid-60s. Buffy Nailon has this preview of The Fall of 55.
Just over 50 years ago, in the fall of 1955, scandal hit the pages of Boise's newspapers.
Crush the monster. Disclosure that the evils of moral perversion prevail in Boise on an extensive scale.
When I first started this project, I had no idea the scope. I had no idea the time commitment.
That's local filmmaker Seth Randal talking about his film Fall of 55. Randal's good-humored description of the filmmaking process belies the serious subject of the film. 5 years ago, he began making a short film about the events that rocked Boise that fall.
What happened was, in October of 1955, a probation officer who worked with juvenile delinquents discovered that some of the teenagers he worked with were having sex with grown men in exchange for money or in exchange for alcohol. There was no force involved. The juveniles were willing participants, but they were minors nonetheless.
Not long afterwards, Idahoans opened the local newspaper to find the headline, "Boiseans held on morals count." 3 men had been arrested on Halloween night as a result of the probation officer's inquiries. They were later accused of being part of a sex ring involving teenage boys.
In the emotional reaction that followed, 16 men were prosecuted, and nearly half of them were involved with consenting adults. Men quit having their weekly poker nights. It got to the point where 2 men would be afraid to walk down the street together because they would be afraid of being thought of as being homosexual. It was picked up by Time magazine. It was picked up in newspapers throughout the country. So it really became an embarrassment for the community.
Although the scandal happened over 50 years ago, the Morals Drive of 55 is a story that people have returned to and re-examined again and again, including filmmaker Seth Randal. Probably the most well-known account of the events is John Geraci's book, The Boys of Boise, published in 1965.
I first learned about the book in high school. My cousin's girlfriend told me about it and said there had been this big scandal in Boise, and so I tracked down the book. And being the kind of nerd I was in high school, I went right away to the microfilm and started looking and was interested and fascinated that there had been such a massive scandal in Boise. This was huge news.
Geraci's book was a natural start for Randal's research, but it was only the beginning. Over the last 5 years, Randal has done hundreds of hours of his own research and conducted over 1,000 interviews. Because of this, there are stories in the film that have never been told.
You had a lot of people who fled Boise because of this. One very powerful interview we have is with the son of a businessman who fled the state, who got out of town to avoid prosecution. The entire family got out of Boise because Dad got a tip that he was about to be arrested. And that's one of the very powerful stories that has never been told before. Not like this. Not in this kind of detail.
It is one thing for a boy 10, 12, or 14 years old to be victimized, but it is quite another for a young man 18 or 20 years old who knows what he is doing to be soliciting business around bus stations and other places.
Despite all the press written about the Fall of 55, accounts about the incidents differed then, and they still do today. Eugene Thomas, the deputy prosecutor at the time, said during a recent phone interview, the story actually began at the local YMCA. He said some parents complained. Their little boys were encountering lewd conduct from adult men while they were learning how to swim. For him and many others who remember the stories, the episodes were about protecting children from pedophiles, not about bigotry.
It was a simple life. People didn't have those kind of problems, and I guess when they saw that, they just thought it was illegal, against the law, maybe it was, and they wanted to enforce the law. And maybe it became sort of a witch hunt.
Alan Verda, historical advisor on the film, explains the environment in America at the time.
People often look back at the 1950s as a simple time of Ozzie and Harriet and stuff like that, but there were really some great underlying tensions and fears underneath in American society. Communists were certainly public enemy number one, but homosexuals in general were right up there as well.
Randal says politics, ignorance, and the media fed attitudes across the country during the 1950s.
Society drew a connection between homosexuals and communism because it was thought two things. It was thought that gay people had a weaker moral fiber and therefore could be easily converted to communism. And there was another thought that they were also susceptible to blackmail because they were living this secret life, and therefore communists could get at them. This is not my crazy hypothesis. This was printed in the New York Times.
Homosexuality was an enigma to people back then. Eugene Thomas said that the community was puzzled by it. He also said that during the era of the morals drive, gays were known as the third sex.
The greatest tragedy of all is the fact that young boys so involved grow into manhood with the same inclinations of those who are called homosexuals. No matter what is required, this sordid mess must be removed from this community. The Idaho Daily Statesman.
There are many who believe the memories of the events were tainted by the media and by John Gerassi's book. That's one reason why Randal feels it's important that the Boise community is involved in the film. Others from outside the city have told the story from their point of view for years. So people from around the Treasure Valley lent their voices, often without compensation, to help make the Fall of 55. Randal feels this helps the film tell the story through a fresh lens.
I don't know why a lot of people are involved with this, but they just felt like they wanted a part in telling this story, in telling the story of our community. This story does not just belong to the people who lived these events. It belongs to all Boiseans. It belongs to all Idahoans. This is our history, and we have a right to understand what really happened without the history being clouded by the Boys of Boise book.
Since the Fall of 55, old photos of the accused in newspapers have faded, and the newspapers themselves are yellowed. But the powerful emotions behind the stories have not faded. In 1995, the Idaho Statesman followed up on a story about one of the teenagers involved in the morals drive who committed suicide. Just as they had done in the past, people put ink to paper and wrote emotional letters to the editor. Many wanted to know why the issue was being dredged up again after so many years. It's a question Randal gets asked all the time.
It's relevant because it's important to understand why Boiseans reacted the way they did. Most people nowadays would say the community overreacted. Well, why did the community overreact? What were the forces in play that caused the people of Boise to react the way they did? We need to know that to prevent something like this from happening again in the future.
The Fall of 55 began as a mere 30-minute made-for-television movie. In June, it will premiere at New Fest 2006 in New York City. I'm Buffy Nailon.
A Boise opening of the Fall of 55 is expected within the next 3 to 6 months. That's Friday Focus for this week. I'm Sadie Babbitts. Thanks for joining us.